Hello, greetings, good afternoon, good morning, or whatever time it is that you're viewing this on-demand training. Richard Kreiner here, recording this deep inside the hallowed walls of Virginia Department for Aging and Rehab Services Central Office. Um, and really excited to be bringing to you guys our community stakeholders, our partner agencies, and our vocational rehab providers and funders a first of what will be a series of brief on-demand training around customized employment. And just real quick before I have the honor of passing the baton over to Nancy Brooks Lane, who is our subject matter expert, who's been working here with us in Virginia to develop capacity, provide training, and implement customized employment with fidelity. I just want to set the scene and say the topic that we're going to be addressing here in this training series on customized employment is one of really high importance in Virginia for DARS. As an agency that's invested in innovation, we're invested in quality, and we're invested in impact for our customers. Job seekers with disabilities in Virginia. Customized employment is an evidence-based and impactful solution for many folks who may not have been able to achieve the ideal outcomes in terms of self-sufficiency and employment and quality of life with some of our traditional labor market-based approaches. And you're going to learn more about how customized employment solves some of those challenges as we go through this training series. But for now, buckle in, sit down, and I hope you enjoy the ride. And I'm going to introduce you here to my good friend, Nancy Brooks Lane.
Thank you, Richard. It is such a joy to be here with each of you. And I love working with Richard and Donna and the DARS team. Doug Crandall and I will be the trainers in this series, and we hope it's beneficial. What we're hoping for, say that you have a meeting with a family and a job seeker, and you have to explain what customized employment discovery are all about. We're hoping that being able to pull the link to these brief trainings will provide you with a quick access to the information you need without having to sit through a very, very long training at that point in time. So they really do have a targeted purpose, which is to provide you with quick information, quick updates prior to you needing to use the information in an actual situation. So the training topics, which you'll hear, because that's part of utilizing discovering customized employment, for those who are going to implement the methodology, they have to be trained. It's a competency-based training. There's a lot of experiential aspects of it where people practice the methodology, and the topics include, of course, discovering customized employment, and within that overarching methodology, there's task analysis and systematic instruction, natural supports, getting away from paid supports in all the work that we do, being able to build those connections with people who aren't paid to do the work, that's social capital. And those individuals who care about the individual having a working life become part of the team. They become part of helping you and the job seeker in partnership obtain employment goals. Customized job planning and development, interest-based negotiation for community employment. And that simply means that negotiating the job is based on the interest of the job seeker, so they're well matched to the needs of the business. And then the extended employment supports, the ongoing supports the person needs to continue to acclimate to the new job and be successful.
It's a good mix of relevant topics that really cover the full life cycle of discovery and customized employment.
And at any point in time, someone can re-enter any one of those areas after the individuals become employed. or after the job seeker's been doing the work. So it's a cycle that can continue based on the needs.
And our pledge again is to keep these nice and brief for you guys. So it's something that really realistically you can tap into, view, get what you need out of it, and get back into your groove of whatever it is you're doing. And it won't be a significant time demand to do it this way. And then to also have it broken out into these chunks for you so that you can select any of these topics that you want that's relevant to your needs at any given time.
And the other piece about the training, we know different roles require different levels of information. So for the employment specialist, who is going to be working closest to the job seeker in the methodology, um, they need to have the highest level of training. A VR counselor may not need that level of in the weeds training, but they may need to understand what is a good outcome. Is there a logical thread from discovery to the job development piece? So know that we respect the fact of using an often um, governmental phrase, need to know. We respect the fact that not everybody needs to have all the real detailed information, but they need information that's relevant to them being able to successfully do the work that they have been charged with doing around discovery and customized employment, whether it's the actual methodology or um, uh, paying for good outcomes. That this discovery profile has been done with fidelity, and yes, we approve it for payment. So anytime we are focusing on outcomes, we have got to be grounded in values. The values guide us. They guide us to stay on track and not lose sight of what we want to be the final outcome. So the values of many, if not all, best practices and person-centered practices is that they're person-centered. There is choice, self-determination. We focus on competence of the individual. So often we have only looked at the individual from a perspective of low expectations. Like this person can only work in a grocery store, when in fact, there is no one perfect job for everybody. There are numerous jobs. And if we do a good job of matching who the individual is, their interests, the skills they have, or the skills that they can be taught, then we are looking at their competence to guide us. And we're also not increasing stereotypes by perpetuating those low expectations. Social inclusion, being a part of community, not only being having a presence in the community, but experiences in the community. You can be a part of something and not be um, participating in the event. You can be physically in a community and still be isolated. So we're talking about not only being a community, but interacting, being engaged with the community. And then employment occurring in real jobs in real places in community.
Love it. Those are fantastic values. And I think as you guys are watching these, hearing these values, these are the kind of things that are going to resonate already with the way we approach our work, whether you're a vocational rehab counselor or a job coach or a member of the AT team.
So obviously, we need to define what is discovery and what is customized employment. So customized employment involves personalizing the employment relationship between a job seeker and an employer in order to meet the needs of both. It's an authentic process of getting to know who the job seeker is and getting to know the needs of a business. And we do that by identifying through a series of activities and methodologies the individual skills, interests, needs, if they are such, accommodations. Um, and that's part of discovery. And then the job task or content, job environment, they're tailored to meet who the job seeker is, and the job is negotiated. So it's not necessarily an existing job. It's a job that is occurring in terms of needing to be done that possibly nobody has addressed. It's part of why the business is not doing as well. Or people with who are hired to do other tasks get pulled into doing tasks that take them away from the expertise they bring to the job that could be done by someone who is not being paid this high salary, who was not hired for the specific task, but can be brought in to help the business become more efficient and effective. So when we think about discovery, it's not a process unto itself. It's not like, okay, we've done discovery, we're through. Um, the end goal is always employment. Discovery is the method of finding out and answering the question, who is this person? And then being able to match well who they are to the needs of the business. And I know you've already heard me say that several times in this short training. So that's kind of the crux of the process. And it's a path to quality employment outcomes. Again, starting with, okay, who is this person? Where are their interests, skills, their capacity to be an effective part of the workforce? And where are those needs and skills part of the mission of a business? And typically we think of medium and small businesses.
Hey, Nance, and I love, just some of the points you're hitting on here. And, just to say for folks who might not be familiar with the actual service model that Virginia DARS is using in terms of purchasing customized employment as a sponsored service, we do look at it as it being an individual gets discovery when we make a decision that they're the right fit for customized employment. So we never use discovery as a standalone. And I think just from an ethical standpoint, one of the things that as we're growing in terms of our level of competency and fidelity in terms of how we provide this service is to really better stay that course when we make decisions about who's going to receive the service. And as we provide that service throughout the continuum of customized employment, that we never get into that I'd say rut of maybe reverting back to placement types of strategies once we get to that customized employment development phase or whatnot, but really following this model through.
Well said, and so important. Thank you. So customized employment focuses on the interests, skills, and tasks that the individual has. And skills, often there may be one skill that generalizes to another skill. So that's where we teach new skills that are tied to their interests that maybe they've not had a chance to learn, but fit very well what their interests are. Vocational themes, we think broadly about vocational themes. For example, if someone has an interest in cars, we don't go to a vocational theme of cars because that's limited. If we run through the various places where cars are tied to a business, then we have fewer options. And if we think about, okay, what are cars? They're all about transportation, getting something from one place to another. And that opens up so many other areas, from airline to the bus system to utilizing cars as part of someone's interest in collecting and almost entertainment. So vocational themes are broader because it opens up many more options that, if we think too narrowly, are missed. Also, conditions of success. What are the conditions under which the person will be more successful? We want to incorporate that. We want that in all of our jobs. And then employer engagement. It's all about getting to know those medium and small businesses in community and having a relationship. So you are known as part of the solution. You are known as someone who can help businesses meet their workforce needs. And so when we think about customized employment, we're not looking for existing jobs with existing job descriptions. We're finding out what are the biggest stressors in a business, what needs are not being met. And those specific questions get to know who the business is so that we're helping meet the needs of a business and finding the individual who can meet those needs. Um, and one thing that we get so stuck on, because we're so comfortable when we think we've solved a problem with one solution, that we're done with it and we can check it off our list. But actually, we need to recognize that there are thousands and thousands of ways that someone can earn a living. And when we change that perspective, it opens up so many options. And just a really quick um, example, someone who loves working with dogs and cats. Um, if we just think about pet stores or vets, we lose some opportunities that may be equally of value to the individual that they haven't had a chance to explore, that we explore through discovery. And it could be ranches, it could be farms, it could be mobile grooming facilities, and on and on. So we want to be expansive in thinking about options and not narrow it down to, okay, this is the one job that this will be a good fit for this individual.
And the other thing I would say is what the science tells us is when customized employment is done to fidelity, it is an evidence-based practice that gets outcomes. So to recognize that we can't be a la carte. We can't choose some of these that we want to try or some of these that we want to do and expect it to have that same level of impact. To really embrace customized employment and to do our due diligence in terms of setting the scene for the individuals we're working with to achieve success in employment and quality of life and independence, all those things, really kind of learning about the model, following the protocol, and having confidence in the protocol that when you get stuck somewhere, if you continue working through the protocol, the solutions will emerge.
And it's fun. When I was the director of an organization and we were shifting from a very sheltered workshop setting to community-based best practices and evidence-based practices, um, many of the staff would talk about, oh, this is so much more interesting. It is so much more fun. We are getting so much better outcomes and people are happier. Behavioral issues are resolving because they were being behavioral choices that were not in the person's best interest were being engaged in because the person was trying to say something. I'm not happy. I'm not content. I don't want to be in this building all the time. I want to do what I want to do in terms of having a valued role. So we're really talking about customized employment. It's not a labor market approach. And the difference is that the labor market approach tends to work with individuals with fewer barriers to employment. It involves jobs that we know about, so existing jobs with existing job descriptions. It uses job postings, individual has to complete applications. It's a competitive interviewing process. And often people utilize a somewhat ineffective process of just going from business to business and saying, are you hiring? That approach works for many people, but customized employment was specifically developed because there is a part of the workforce that could be helping solve employer needs and building capacity that's been left out because the way they move through life may be more unique than what we have understood in the past. And we go from low expectations and put someone, for example, fast food, that is one of the most difficult places to work. Customers can be jerks. The pace of work can be very, very fast. Um, and so, why would we put someone who has the greatest support needs in a job that we, many of us, would fail in? So, it's just a very, very different mindset. The labor market approach works for many, many people, but if someone's been referred for customized employment, it means that approach has not worked well. Maybe they have had typical jobs that fit the traits in this diagram, and they did not last. There was one job after another that was lost. Well, we don't want to put someone through that. That is so depressing and heart wrenching. So, if we can step back and say, okay, there are people for whom that approach does not work, let's think differently and use what will work based on what all we've learned over, oh my gosh, it's over 20 years. So customized employment is an economic development model. We use social capital, we use connection, who knows who could help open a door, and we build community connections. um, so just to take a moment to think about economic development, which is so different from the labor market, and make sure that I'm defining clearly the distinction. In this work we do, economic development, examples of that would be the tax incentives for businesses who hire people with disabilities. It's looking at training that someone might need to increase their skill sets, to help them being promoted in a job, or skills that they need to learn to do some of the tasks as their responsibilities grow. And that's not tied to IQ. Um, and I think that many people may think, well, this individual has developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities. They can't learn. Well, that's not true. That is such a cruel thing to think and say. There are many ways that individual gain skills um, and learn and grow. And if it's tied to what they're interested in, um, that's half the process. We also think about economic development as digging into how do we create new jobs um, and increase standards of living with a living wage. So that's a different model than the labor market model because it looks at various um, factors that are tied to work being part of how someone has a good life beyond the job.
So Nance, in thinking about this and kind of using that economic development mindset, would you agree that customized employment is a practice from the business community perspective, is something that businesses that are successful, businesses that are innovating, businesses that are kind of ahead of the curve in terms of implementing the best practices to bring in the best talent, to provide the best services or products, this is approach that they've already embraced, maybe slightly
Oh, yeah,
different than how we do it, but yeah.
absolutely. It's just good business sense. And so the methods that we use in customized employment and getting to know the person is and matching them well to the task came out of progressive business practices. So the methodology came out of business practices that were grounded in what makes the business more effective and efficient. And then we tested them in the work that we do and added to some of the steps. So absolutely, this is just good business sense. If you want to get good outcomes, choose the right person who has that interest and that ability, and their work is not so much a job as it is an enjoyment to being able to reach goals and going through a process that has meaning for them. That's part of who they are, what they like to do.
Really, for me, and thinking about all that, Nance, it really kind of brings into focus how much of at the heart of customized employment is the concept of community and reciprocity and healthy ecosystems and communities, right? Because we're helping individuals achieve their goals in terms of employment and self-sufficiency and finding a good fit. But we're also helping workforce develop creative solutions to unmet needs that they have at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. It's a win-win, isn't it? To use maybe a too often used cliche.
Yes, indeed.
So when we think about economic development, we are uh, getting out in the community, in the workforce to explore what's happening. What are new businesses? What are trends? What are gaps in terms of the goals a business has that they need help achieving? So that is creating employment opportunities. And then again, it's not just putting someone in a job, which is such a disrespectful way of talking about helping someone become employed. It dehumanizes them, but that's sometimes how we speak. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement between a potential employee and a business owner. And that's negotiated. So to summarize, as we're coming to the end, discovery and customized employment require getting out of your office, exploring a variety of places and activities one on one with the job seeker, listening to and observing the job seeker's verbal and nonverbal responses. Often we have taught job seekers to be compliant. And so they may say what they think we want us to hear the answer as, which is sad. So often what the person does may be more honest than what they say. So listen to both. Um, Discovery answers the question, who is this individual? Not what is the specific ideal job for this individual? We don't know. First of all, there's no ideal job because there are many jobs that fit who the person is, just like they are for anybody. And all of us have many interests that can be fulfilled through a variety of industries or jobs or places that have a vision and a mission that ties so well to who we are. And next steps become apparent based on what you learn as you spend time getting to know the person. So, getting comfortable with not knowing is critical. If we know who the person is and we haven't even begun discovery, then we are fooling ourselves because this process starts with, just being open to listening, hearing, discovering, almost like if you think about Sherlock Holmes. There's a great piece that I've used in training before where he describes all the discrete observations that he made that told him who this person was in a fantastical way. But that's what we're talking about, not coming in with preconceived notions, but seeing this person through the lens of getting to know who they are based on what they tell you and being in real places, in actual places. Discovery doesn't happen in disability specific programs, it happens in community, in real places. So, in summary, customized employment stands on the shoulders of supported employment. That means we want to honor the fact that supported employment was part of the solution for many, many folks who also needs weren't being met well, getting to know who they were and matching them to jobs. But it went a step further because not everybody could benefit from supported employment. They needed more intense time to get to know who the person was. And that's what customized employment is about. It's not a service or program, it's an approach. It's not group based. There is some discovery methodology that works from a peer support framework. But what we're talking about in this model is one-on-one discovery. We're not looking for that dream job. Is there really a dream job? There are so many ways that we can be happy in doing the work that fits well who we are. It's not a vocational evaluations and testing. It's not comparing the person to someone else. Um, and it's not interest inventories. Again, asking any of us on any particular day what we're interested in may look differently, but if we spend time together in community, you're going to see a trend of what I gravitate toward, what I'm interested in. And that's what we're looking for, the evidence. So going that step further to get out in the real world and see who the person is. So it's an approach with database methodology and fidelity scales, and all of that information is available in written form. So, so know that you can receive copies, and we'll make sure that they're tied to this brief training.
So Nance, if it's okay with you, I would like to ask you one question before we sign off here.
Okay.
My question for you, Nance. I think over the conversation that we've had today, we've done a pretty good job of talking about what is customized employment and discovery. And although brief and at a macro level, we also discussed how it's implemented, what it looks like. What I would like to ask you, and kind of putting yourself in from the perspective of, say, a vocational rehab counselor that's viewing this, or a CRP, or in Virginia we call them ESO provider that's looking at this, or maybe even an individual or the family member of an individual that's receiving VR services. What's the why? You know, why do we want to try something new, something that might have a little more nuance and protocol behind it than the standard, what we've always been doing? What's the why?
So communities are stronger and viable when everyone has a role in the community in a valued way. Wolfensberger speaks about many of the individuals that we work with disabilities often don't have valued roles. They are seen as more of a taker than a giver. And that is a false concept that we've come up with. So everyone wants to have a valued role, a way they spend their day that they enjoy. And we have not been able to get good outcomes prior to discovery and customized employment with individuals with the greatest impact of disability. We want everyone to have a good life. And there are many complexities that create reasons why that's not possible. Well, what we know in this particular set of factors, the complexity had to do with the fact that we were not using methods that got to know who the person was and matched them well to a business. And I've said that over and over because that's what we're talking about. So the why is so that everyone has a chance to have a meaningful day, a meaningful way to earn income and a valued role, and to develop relationships that aren't just based on the disability system and staff who work in the disability system. We know people are safer when they have relationships beyond just people who are paid to work with them, because people develop those relationships, social capital and connections that enrich our lives And we've seen that over and over and over again. So if anyone doubts any of that, we've got so many stories to show what is possible if we have higher expectations and we don't think of people with disabilities as other. We recognize that they are our peers. They're part of our community. They're part of our workforce. And all of us, at some point, if we live long enough, are going to have some form of disability, whether it's related to mobility, our senses, our cognition. So disability is natural. It's part of life, either from the beginning, when someone comes into this world, or at the end as we continue to age and change.
Well said, Nance. And I think you had mentioned there might be some good resources on the Griffin Hamas website for folks to check out. I believe you got a compilation of success stories titled Stories from the Field. That's a really great read just in terms of getting an idea of, from the perspective of individuals receiving the service, how it works and the types of impacts it can make for them. Well, with that, Nancy and Dallas, again, thank you very much for joining me for this conversation. I'm looking forward to many more with you guys, and hope everybody has a good day.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a delight.